Welcome back to another I Start Wondering conversation where we explore topics related to women as they age and grow and continue to find their way through life. I'm really excited today because we're going to have a conversation about what I like to call a fallow period in life. Just taking time for ourselves, something that we're not in often invited to do. And I'm really excited about the guest who is joining me today. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, I'm Dorian Martin. I'm the I Start Wondering founder, and I'd like to welcome our guest, Jill Penaloza, who I know from teaching meditation, but she is lots more than that. And so, Jill, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Dorian. I am so happy to be here with you.
So let's give people a little context on you. I shared that you teach meditation, but what else? You've got a large family, you have a career, all those things. Share with us.
Well, the meditation, the moving meditation, Shengzhen, is probably the center of what I do. Both the practice and the work I do with the organization, and the teaching of the meditation. And then that serves as a support to my professional work, which is as an art psychotherapist, specializing in psychospiritual development and really looking at what is the relationship between mental illness, between depression, anxiety, all sorts of kind of emotional difficulty. What's the relationship between that and our tendency to move away from our bodies, away from ourselves, and how to help people come back into their bodies so that they can come back to themselves. So that's kind of my primary focus in my professional work. I do have a wonderfully big family that is really rich, has given me many, many, many opportunities for growth and expansion myself, lots of learning. So, I'm just thinking as I say this, my grandkids and the gift that my grandkids also bring to me are just so amazing. So just a shout out for grandkids as we start here.
Grandkids are awesome. I borrow everybody's grandkids, which is always so much fun, and then I get them back.
Yes, I like that part too.
Exactly, exactly. So we're going to be talking about what I call a fallow period. And let me just kind of define it for people initially and how I define it. Fallow is an agricultural term. Farmers at one point, they may still do but they used to let their fields go fallow or they wouldn't plant them for a certain period of time, allowing the nutrients in the soil to rebuild. So, as many people know, I ended up taking a year of what I dubbed as a fallow period after mentally, emotionally, and physically burning myself out, caring for my father, completing graduate school, and doing work. And I needed that reset time to be able to replenish, but also to begin to chart where I wanted to go. And so I know, Jill, that you and I've talked about it before. You've done something similar, maybe not the same way, but you did it earlier in life. Can you share a little bit what you did, but also what was the run up to that?
Sure. So my year, my fallow year, which I love the term. I think there's lots of ways to kind of play with it. Happened when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And I had at 19 had my first child, actually at 20. I was pregnant at 19. So I came straight out of my teens, had 2 kids before I was 22, graduated from college, and went straight into work, into corporate America, actually, trying to make sure that I could be an equal partner with my husband in paying bills and getting us started as a young couple, buying a house, doing the things that I had been raised to believe were the things that a responsible person does. And I was very committed to those ideals. I didn't know there was really any other choice. And my mom had been a captain in the Marines. So I was raised by this beautiful, like, can-do energy. And my husband, his mom had been a single mom, worked 3 jobs in order to keep his family going and well taken care of. And so he and I both came from families where the mother did not stay home. That wasn't what the mom did. Mom took care of the kids, and she went out and helped with income. And so I did that. I was really, really good at that. And by the time I was 29, I was so separated from any awareness of who I was that there was this massive crash that I experienced. Now, what's interesting looking back as I'm saying this to you is that when I was, I want to say maybe 22, I had an awareness that we had just moved. We were living in Fort Collins, and we had just moved down to Denver, Colorado, and we're renting a house there and just starting to kind of get our feet under us. And I had said to my husband, I think I need to stay home with the girls and raise them. And that was not something that he was able to understand easily without having some feelings about it. And I was so afraid of him being upset or disappointed. It tells you a little bit about where I was at that age, that that even though it meant so much for me to spend time with our 2 girls, for him, it felt like it kind of put his world upside down. And so I chose to go with making sure everything was okay. Making sure he was okay. I figured, I can do this. I can make this happen. And so by 29, I was the first woman salesperson in an organization that sold color separation. So I would work with like Sears and other companies when they needed a magazine printed and look at how to help the pictures get printed well. And so this company I was with made a big deal. She's the first woman here. Let's see if women actually can work in sales. Right? So it's a big deal. There's other women who want to come up from customer service into sales. And I'm kind of that guinea pig that's showing them I can do it. And so I had also that pressure on me to do well and to stick with it. But what ended up happening is I found that I was functioning less and less fully. Like, I would need to go see clients and I would not be able to find my way there. So it's showing up not in cognition, but well, a little bit in cognition, because I'm not able to find my way there, but not as in a knowing that I don't want to do this. That is kind of an awareness, but my body is stopping me from being able to do this work. And that's how hard it was for me to listen to this, that I could not bear to hear what I knew to be true, which is I couldn't do this. And so when my body stopped functioning, I couldn't find my way. Eventually, I couldn't even, I didn't want to leave the house. I couldn't make phone calls to clients. And then eventually I was talking to a friend and she said, have you ever done therapy? And I said, what? Therapy? I've never done therapy. And she said, I'm seeing a therapist. You might want to see a therapist. And so I went to this therapist. And by this time, we're living in Chicago. And this woman says to me, what do you want? And that's the first time anyone in my life has said to me, what do you want? I was raised as the oldest daughter in a family where all my siblings, which there were 7 total, I was in large part responsible as a child for taking care of them or helping to take care of them. And so that wasn't a question I got asked, what do you want? So I was really taken aback, and she said, maybe you need to think about that. So I did. I went home and I thought about it, and I realized what I wanted was to not work. I wanted to stay home with my girls. I wanted to do nothing. And other than that. And so maybe even including that, actually, if I didn't have the kids, I still would have wanted to do nothing. So, but I was not willing not to take care of my girls, at least as much as I possibly could during this time. So, so I told my therapist this, and she said, well, it sounds like you need to talk to your husband and let him know. And so this was the most frightening conversation maybe of my life. And because we were living in a home, paying a mortgage, and we were almost at a point of buying our next home, which was going to have a higher mortgage. So we would have had to have my income. And so I told my husband, I need to talk with you. And we waited until the girls were in bed. And I literally had to turn the lights off in the room so that I did not see his face. And only then could I say to him, you know, I've been doing therapy, and what I'm realizing is I need not to work. And there was no response. He couldn't, it was such a different thing for him to understand that he couldn't speak for several minutes. And I said, are you okay? And he, within the next probably 2 or 3 minutes, said, okay, help me understand this. And I gave him a little bit more detail about what was going on. And he said, then that's what we need to do. We don't buy this new house. We stay here and you stay home. And so here I was all set for this horrible thing. And I didn't need to be. So it shows you how much my stories were playing out for me. So at that point, I did that very hard thing of stepping out of my sales role. And I did it. I was diagnosed with major depression. And so I was seeing a psychiatrist at that point, trying some different medications, though none of them worked. And went in and told the owner of the company that I was not able to work because of this, with such a sadness about what message potentially I was sending for all the other women there, because all the, you know, and it was at a time where there was inappropriate sexualized behavior towards women who were kind of rising up, even all women, but particularly, you know, I can just remember so many sexualized conversations from the men that I worked with. And so there was like this thing of, yep, we knew it, you know, she couldn't do it. So that was disappointing, but I let that go really quick. They're on their own journey. They get to figure that out. So so we moved very soon we stayed in Chicago for right outside of Chicago for just a little while. And then Bob got a new job. So we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. And when we got to North Carolina, I basically stayed in bed for a year, is what it kind of felt like. I would get up in the mornings to make the girls breakfast or do what was needed there, get them off to school, and then I would go back to bed. And they got home at about 3:30. They took a bus, so they get home about 3:30. About 3 o'clock, I'd get out of bed and kind of organize whatever needs to be organized around the house so that it wouldn't look like I had been in bed all day for the girls. And then do afternoon and dinner, and then I'd go back to bed. And most of that time in bed was spent reading. I read like a fiend, everything I could get my hands on. My neighbors ended up calling me bookwoman because they never saw me other than when I'd go out to get books and come back in, right? And so I read and I read and I read anything I wanted to read. I loved to read, always have loved to read. And then what would happen, eventually I found a journal about I think it's like journaling your inner child or something. And what I did was I would wake up in the middle of the night automatically, and I would start in this book, and it combined art and journaling. And I just would spend maybe 3 hours in the middle of the night every night up in the quiet, just exploring all these parts of myself that I had lost connection with so long ago, probably when I was very, 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 very young. And getting to know, I have so many journals full of so many feelings related to all the things that I had experienced and was holding, and that found themselves stored in my body, resulting in the choices I had made to give up myself. So as I was going through this fallow period, which was actually quite productive, you know, it's interesting because I think of fallow and I think of productivity, but it was so productive. And so towards the end of that year, I understood in my body that I was ready for something. I just didn't know what the something was. But without that year, I don't think I ever would have understood. I never would have been able to transition to this next stage where I actually brought myself with me into my life. And what happened then was we moved once more for another job, and I did not want to sit in bed anymore. That didn't feel good anymore. I had this desire to really serve, to be on this earth in a new way. And so I decided, I had my undergraduate degree was in fine arts and in education. And so I decided to combine those and be an art teacher and get my master's. So I went to a local school, went up to the desk in the master's program office and said, I want to get my master's in teaching and art. And they said, are you sure you don't want to be an art therapist? And I said, oh my gosh, my mom told me I should be an art therapist when I was 18. And which was when art therapy was just a brand new baby. And I said, I think I'm supposed to be an art therapist. And that was all she wrote. After that, it was everything kind of naturally unfolded, and leading me to the life I live now.